To say that Trump's first day back in office was incredibly eventful would be a massive understatement. The changes that he has made to federal policy through executive orders alone is enormous. And I think it's incredibly important to quickly look at what he has changed and how that is going to affect America, Americans, and honestly, the whole world. Now, before we specifically get into executive orders, there's one thing that I want to mention first that is not a part of that, and that is the pardons. Donald Trump, on his first day in office, pardoned over 1,500 people involved in the attack on the Capitol on January 6th in 2021. He has given a green light for these people to be released from prison, have the federal government take a step back from them and let these people go out and be a part of society, essentially sending the message that if you attack the government, but you do it for the sake of supporting me, then I have your back as the most powerful man in the country. That includes a former leader of the Proud Boys and of the Oath Keepers, both of whom were serving incredibly long sentences in prison for sedition against the United States government. These are men who were charged and convicted by courts, by juries, for their actions to try and violently overturn the government. Those men are now free, and who knows what they'll be doing with their free time. So those incredibly concerning pardons aside, it only gets worse when you look at how many executive orders he's issued and how wide-ranging and concerning the nature of them is. Trump has issued dozens of them today, and he did make that promise that he would be issuing at least 100 on his first day. And you may have seen he was at an event center signing them amongst all of his adoring fans and throwing pens to them as souvenirs, as you do when you are the most powerful man on earth. So for those of you that don't know, executive orders are basically directives from the chief executive of the United States, that being the president himself, about how he wants the executive to be run, how he wants it to interpret law, and how he wants it to enforce the law. And look, I can't go into all of them. Like I said, there are dozens, but there are some that I want to focus on. Those being his decision to withdraw from the World Health Organization, withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement, to declare that Mexican cartels are terrorist organizations, to declare that there was a national state of emergency currently in the United States, which gives him more power over the military within the United States borders, and his attempt to abolish birthright citizenship. Now, the first two there are concerning for the same reasons. They are basically cutting ties with the international community. His decision to withdraw from the WHO, the World Health Organization, basically means that the largest organization in the world internationally that focuses on fighting diseases and preventing and combating pandemics will basically lose a significant portion of its funding and be much less equipped to do its job in the future, which is incredibly concerning because it is poorer countries that organization benefits the most, fighting diseases. So pretty concerning, to say the least, for people in third world countries. Now, Trump actually withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement during his first term, and then Biden, of course, re-entered it. It is basically a legally binding agreement between 196 countries to basically hit certain goals when it comes to reducing emissions. The basis of the whole treaty is this idea that no individual country is going to transition to being carbon neutral because it is expensive, it is difficult, and it gives other countries an advantage over them if those other countries are sticking to traditional fossil fuels. So the idea is if everyone comes together and cooperates in working towards a net zero future, then no individual country is going to have an advantage over anyone else for this transition taking place. And it's basically just a big effort internationally of cooperation. And by taking a step back from that and withdrawing from the treaty, Trump has basically said, look, we are not going to cooperate. We're going to do as much with coal and gas as we possibly can. And therefore, other nations around the world are going to see that and basically be at a disadvantage for not doing the same thing. There are so many bad ideas here. Onto the idea of Mexican cartels being classified as terrorist groups. Now, cartels are incredibly awful and I would dare say evil organizations that benefit off human suffering. And they are terrible and they should be stopped. But here's the thing. They are not terrorist groups. That is not saying that they are good or they are justifiable. It's just that it is a matter of definition that these groups are not specifically killing people to achieve political goals. They are very obviously motivated solely by money. They are criminal enterprises that seek profit, not ideological terrorist cells. But why that raises concern is because it has been a Republican talking point for quite a while, this idea of using the United States military to crush cartels. And a lot of people are concerned by the idea that classifying cartels as terrorist groups could be seen as a Republican attempt to create pretext for the idea that military force could be used to go into Mexico and crush these groups. So essentially the idea of trying to justify a potential invasion of Mexico without Mexico's consent. Now, as for his declaration of a national emergency at the southern border, Trump has done that pretty much to give himself more power over the situation, and particularly how he is basically now going to use the military to solve what he sees as that national emergency. By declaring a national emergency, Trump in this executive order is basically saying that the situation there is so terrible, I have the ability, under a declaration of a national emergency, to let the military do anything without it being impeded. And the main way that he talks about it is the idea of construction. And you can probably imagine what that means. It basically means that the military is going to have the authority to build whatever Trump wants it to there without anyone being able to stop him. Now, that could probably be Trump's way of dreaming of finally getting his border wall. But the main concern there is the idea that the military is basically going to be managing the border under Trump's direct supervision and the Department of Defense. So what does that actually look like in practice? Are we going to see the military going into people's homes, collecting people near border towns that they think might be illegal? Well, we don't know yet, but Trump has given himself quite a bit of power to seemingly do whatever he wants there. Now, finally, is Trump's notion that he can somehow abolish birthright citizenship in the United States Constitution. What Trump has done is issued an executive order that is basically telling the federal government that it should act as if birthright citizenship is not valid under certain circumstances. Now, birthright citizenship was introduced as a part of the United States Constitution to basically give citizenship to freed slaves after the Civil War, basically saying that anyone born on US soil was a US citizen, and it has been part of the Constitution ever since. But a lot of people have had a problem with it. And Trump is certainly one of those people, because birthright citizenship in practice means that people that are not American citizens can give birth in the United States or anywhere under US jurisdiction and authority, and that child will be a US citizen automatically. And there is no way for conservatives to get rid of that without a constitutional amendment. So it seems that Trump's notion here is to basically force the issue to the Supreme Court and see if he can somehow get a new interpretation of what that part of the Constitution means. Trump's argument in his executive order is that that part of the Constitution was specifically made to give citizenship to former slaves, and therefore it is a misinterpretation of the Constitution for it to be granted to non-US citizens who give birth on US soil. And he is directing his agencies and the entire federal government to act as if that is already the case. How that would work in practice, according to Trump's wording, is that if a child is born in the United States and its parents are either illegal immigrants or they are only in the United States on temporary visas, then the United States federal government will not recognize that child as being a US citizen. That executive order is basically designed to be a lawsuit, something that Trump explicitly wants to go to the Supreme Court, so that the conservative majority there might just agree with his interpretation of the United States Constitution and birthright citizenship in general. So those are just a couple of the ways that Trump is actively changing the United States and how the federal government applies its rules. And it is crazy to think that this is probably only going to ramp up even more as time goes on. Because looking at the state of this, I can't believe that day one was eventful as it was. And the most concerning part of it is, it's only day one.